Yo, what is up, everyone? Glad to have you back. Episode number 2. We continue breaking down the mindset, strategies, actions to break you out of financial dependence on your job or business and into a life of financial independence where you choose the life you want to live each day. Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of The Passive Life, part of Master Passive Income's podcast network. I am your host, Zach Zimmer. You can find out more on me at realzachzimmer.com. But I'm here to guide you through this journey of getting into high level investing and getting your passive life. Thank you if you went through the first episode. If you couldn't tell, it was very challenging for me. Again, this is the first I've ever talked to no one, yet anyone in the world who wants to listen. The video makes it even that much more daunting because I'm a doer. I am not a polished presenter, podcaster, so this is all new to me. So thank you for getting through that first one. These will all get hopefully better sounding on your end as I get more comfortable. And we'll be here for the next probably 5 to 10 episodes, just solo, just myself talking to you about the mindset, tips, tactics, strategies, actions I took over the course of about 6 to 7 years to take $20,000 and turn it into about $60,000 a month net income from passive income. And that's the biggest thing here is it's passive. I do not have a boss. I do not have employees. I do not have anyone to report to or do except myself, my family, my friends. That's what I spend my time doing. And so that's what I want to teach. And that's what I want to help folks to get their life back. So over the next couple episodes, yes, we're going to talk specifically about those things. And then eventually we'll start to bring in other, as Dustin calls us, advanced investors. I kind of cringe at that term advanced because, I look at people like the billionaire who just bought the FedEx headquarters a mile away from me. And he bought that building off market from a REIT who did not want it to be public and let the public and their investors know that they had a struggling asset. But he bought that probably $50 million building for $2 million. That's what I call advanced investing. But what I've done is simple, but not easy. And so I have a hard time calling it advanced, but many people will look at it and say, wow, you bring in 60,000 net income a month in passive investing. Man, that is advanced. But it's all relative to who you follow and who you look at as to what's advanced or not. But yeah, I will be bringing in lots of other friends and colleagues who are also making high 6 figures, 7 figures, both actively in real estate as well as passively. So if you get through these first 10 or so single episodes, then we'll start having a lot more commentary, maybe a lot more laughter and fun as we talk about all of our trials through the area, both in Ohio as well as nationally. So today, what I wanted to get a little bit more detailed into, like creating that passive life, becoming successfully unemployed, as I referred to myself before I even met Dustin, and what it took for me to get there. And there's a term called burning platform. I think it came from really Toyota, of how the Toyota production system, of how the Japanese car industry got built from the burning platform of they were decimated right after World War. They had to be lean. They had to work with much less than the American car industry did. And I think it's another term that Jack Welch used at GE, right? You have to have a burning platform to really get you to change. Now, for me, that burning platform was really two things. One, it was the day when we lost my 6-figure income in a quick hour, right? I was actually in Indiana presenting at a conference. I was teaching continuous improvement to frontline leaders. I was doing frontline leadership training, talking about problem solving, standardized work procedures. And that day, my division was eliminated. And the funny thing was, private equity didn't even know that I was out of town. They didn't know that this conference was going on, that I was teaching the system to, that they just eliminated on a phone call. But so anyhow, I'm in a hotel, and I get told this after a day of presenting. And we had a child. We had about a 6-month old. We had just built a new house, and bam, the leg under my table was gone, swept out from under me. And it was very hard. It was tears. It was tears on both ends. My wife at the other end of the phone, me at one end. And so that was certainly a burning platform before I even knew it was going to be. At that point, had just purchased those first rentals and didn't understand it really at all. Looked at it as a little bit of cash flow and a long-term savings vehicle. Did not understand that it could create this crazy abundant life that it has. So that was really burning platform one, without knowing that it would be. And then the second, as I'm starting to learn about real estate, particularly like the 5-Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss, which isn't a real estate book, but it's a passive life book, right? To teach you how to have a 5-hour work week and a whole bunch of different aspects and industries. And so as I'm reading that book and I'm learning about real estate, then I'm seeing my father and my father-in-law. And I probably mentioned this in the first episode of, they did what we were told. They worked the healthiest 30, 35 years of their life to build up a nest egg to live these great years. And both of them were not able to do that. Their health fell off a cliff, and they are not doing the things they wanted to do. So as I'm seeing those things, and I'm also reading these other books, anything from Robert Kiyosaki and his Rich Dad, Poor Dad advisors is so good at getting your mindset to change. Then I'm understanding real estate. And for me, that meant local. I was very fortunate to live in an area that is, still probably one of the top 10 in the country in terms of the rental returns. This is Midwest, which we don't call it Rust Belt. This is your blue collar, $50,000, $60,000 tenants. And fortunately, we have just an abundant supply of homes because of, whether it's credit issues, like on average, we just have lower credit scores in this type of middle class, Middle Earth America. And these folks can't get their loans. Or you could look at all the colleges we have, right, that probably suck up 100,000 plus homes outside. Once you expand past university housing, it's these rentals. Now, I don't get involved in that market. I know some folks that do, and they really like that, right? They're getting the parents as co-signers. The parents are paying most of these rents, and they're renting them by the bedroom. So that's probably an area I'm not going to talk about because I don't know it. I don't do it. But, I know it is a very lucrative, area when you look into that college rental type of model. But that it sucks up homes was my point. So it's sucking up homes. There's just, it's just an interesting model of how we have real estate that back in that time, when I was buying heavy, about a house a month, that was 2014 to 2018. I bought probably 70 some houses, both rentals and some flips. And those houses were being purchased all in for around that $40,000 to $45,000. Today, I can't do that once a month, but I was still able to do it once a quarter last year. And I was all in for around $55,000 per house. And those rents are at $1,250 now. So back then it was low 40s for a $950 or $1,000. Now it's 55 for a $1,250. So the cap rates, returns, whatever you want to call that, are still very similar. But for me, again, my focus was the C plus, B minus type areas. And why do I do that, right? Why don't I invest in A class? Well, your A class area is definitely going to be more desirable to your folks, owner occupant, that have mortgages, right? So if I'm competing against folks who are going to live in that home, who can pay more? Definitely the owner occupant, right? Who's going to make it their home. And so A class areas, the price of homes are much higher proportionately to the rent that you can get. Right. So in my C plus B minus areas today, right, I'm able to achieve a $55,000 house that rents for $1,250. If I was to pivot to an A class area, like example where I live, I'm probably going to be 150,000, probably three times the amount in a basic, smaller, 1,500 square foot, bed and a half, single garage house. But I certainly can't rent that for 3,600. I may be able to rent it for 2,200, 2,400. So it's three times the cost with only about double the income. So that's why for me it's been the C plus to B minus. I don't get into anywhere below that C type of range. We will talk in another episode about some multis and an interesting 24 unit like 7 building flip that we did. But for today's focus is what got me to the passive income life. And that is single families in blue collar America in the C to B areas. Now, once you build that, right? Once you get that whole portfolio, and I was buying, like I said, about one a month, I put the right systems in place. And we'll probably talk about that, do a whole one on systems and people and empowerment. But you get the people in place because you don't have the time. Hopefully, right, you have another job that you're living off of that income while you're trying to grow this passive portfolio. And actually, let's talk about that for a second. That is, along with my mindset change, the keeping our W-2, keeping my W-2 was the biggest reason why we built the passive life. We lived off of my job, lived well below our means, and didn't touch the passive income snowball, the rental snowball. So if we talk about like in 2013, 2014, right, I was buying a house a month, and each one of those homes would put about 500 a month in cash flow into our pocket, right? So every month we're growing another 500 a month, right? And then we're not touching it. And it's just continuing to create this snowball. You buy more, you buy more. So while I was making, call it 110, 120,000 a year as a W-2, I was making that much passively. And a lot of people would walk away. I remember going to real estate meetups where I would hear guys, young wholesalers. Oh, I just wholesaled a house for, I made $10,000 or $5,000. Oh, I'm going to quit my job and this is all I'm going to do. And I remember telling one, he said, that's a horrible idea. What do you mean I'm going to be a real estate investor? You do that. Now you've killed your snowball, right? You're going to be living, making your rent payments or your house payments, paying for your food, your utilities, your everything out of your investing money. Keep your job. That might be opposite of what a lot of coaches say. Oh, you got to be an entrepreneur. You got to take the risk. You got to go. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying in my experience, that's all I can talk educatedly about. That's all I could talk accurately about is my experience. So I'm never going to say anybody else is wrong. I hate to talk in absolutes. I think that's it's a huge turnoff when somebody talks in absolutes. So hopefully you never hear me do that because I don't like that. But in my experience, keeping the job all the way until passive income was about 3 times that amount is what made us where we're at today. When that snowball became so big that even when we quit the job, or actually I lost my job, it was eliminated again. The snowball was unaffected, right? It didn't barely stop it from growing and growing and growing, and it still is. It's still growing. It's still getting bigger every year because we delayed, right? That delayed gratification. We hear this on podcasts all the time, whether it's in raising your children or just one of the best attributes you can have as a person is the ability to delay gratification. And then that's what it is. So keep that job as long as you can while you build this portfolio. Okay, let's say you don't live in this backyard, right? Then that's where you get into things like these out-of-state investing, right? There's a lot of great books. There's great content. Dustin, that's what Dustin has been doing, right? He wasn't fortunate enough to have these phenomenal returns in his backyard. So that's what he's been doing most of his his investing career is buying where you can get cash flow. And that has been a little bit in my backyard as we came to know. He's got properties locally mixed in areas where I'm at because this is a desirable area. But that's where you got to get out and find those. If you can't find them in your backyard, if you can't make single families or multi-families or any other type of passive income in your area, then you have to branch out and going to these conferences and connecting to education, like in Master Passive Income, that will teach you how to do out-of-state investing. I'm not going to be the best one to do that because I've never done that, except when we'll get into private equity and complete limited partnerships that I get into are obviously not in my backyard. Those are all around the country and even outside of the country that we'll have an episode on. But I didn't create the passive life by investing in private equity and syndications, right? I got here through real asset, hard asset investing in houses in my own backyard. So that's what I want to focus on. But so each one of those properties put about $500 a month in, and I built that up to a little over 50 before I started getting a little bit kind of bored with it, which was a mistake in hindsight because a lot of the things that I've gotten into have had their own challenges. But we will have a specific episode on private equity and what have been some of the good things of it and some of the bad things. But again, building that portfolio, whether local or out of state, is going to be your key. And you want it to get to the point where I remember talking to a buddy one day. I was on the phone and I was scrolling through, looking at bank accounts, and I saw a deposit and it didn't recognize it. I was like, that's an odd deposit amount. What is that? And it was my paycheck. It was funny. He started laughing too. I started laughing. I didn't notice what my paycheck deposit was because it was just insignificant. And that's when I think is the point of, you could say, hey, I can walk away now because this is insignificant. I don't even play a factor in it. And the other thing is how much you're actually taxed in that. And we'll spend time talking about that, but just at a high level, right? All that W-2 income. If you remember, if cash flow quadrant, hopefully everybody listening to this is familiar with the cash flow quadrant book or that whole methodology. If not, read that from Robert Kiyosaki, a great book with more meat. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, everybody talks about, and that was a book I read in 1998. I wish I would have been able to understand it in 98. I didn't really understand it until I read it again around 2011, 12. But cash flow quadrant has a lot more meat in it to help the mindset than Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But yeah, that employee is the highest taxed there is. So yeah, you're working, you might be making $120,000, $130,000 a year, but you're only really bringing home 75 after taxes and all your Social Security and then your health care, and you're putting away in your 401k because that's what you were told to do, is build up this account that actually the guy who created it has come out and said it's not what he intended it to be. It's turned into this ugly mess, which is an interesting 401 chaos, I think is a good book on that. But so yes, my point is you're keeping the least of it, right? If you relate my situation, right, a doctor or a lawyer, right, a high income person, right, if they're doing well, right, 700, 800,000 a year, maybe more. But then you take away the taxes, right? They're making less than I am and working 50 hours a week and have risks, legal risks and medical risks. And I'm sure they're not easy jobs, right? And so it's just crazy how much of the tax code is for passive investing, for hard asset investing. I saw a quote somewhere. I'm totally gonna say it wrong, but it's something like the tax code is 6,000 pages, and like 5,780 of them are about how to deduct income that people with W-2 don't get to use. So, I'm sure you can look at and find out what the exact numbers are. It's something like that. But yeah, it's pretty eye-opening when you realize that what you're being taught to do through your parents, through the education system, is actually the one that the government hits you the hardest on, right? So are they trying to create pawns in the system to just supply the system with money that they can choose whatever they want to do with it. So that's why I like passive income. I pay much, much less to zero taxes when you do things right, when you live your life like a business, when you invest in some of the alternative things that we'll talk about, like ATM machines and apartments, and get cost segregation and bonus depreciation, to where, yes, you can make 700,000 a year and not pay any tax legally. Let me point that out, legally. Um, so yeah, that was the key of building that passive income, keeping your job, keep your job till you get to the point of where you don't even notice that paycheck. Then I feel that's the right time to really live this passive life. And that's the point where you get your time back. Right now, you have more money than time. So get your time back. So like that's kind of the process I would follow is, once you have more money than time, now live your passive life. That's the point where that snowball is going to continue. There's not going to be any risk. You're going to outrun it and live that life. Now, defining that life is going to be different for everyone. Do I have a Rolls Royce? No. Do I want a Rolls Royce? I mean, I guess you could say, oh, it'd be cool, right? But at what cost of my time, right? At what cost of my time would it take for me to have a Ferrari? Or is my 5-year-old edition one Mercedes convertible, is that fine enough? I love it, right? And this isn't about, I don't want to spend time talking about material things, but what I want to touch on here is, you're going to define that lifestyle that you want to require the amount that you need. And for me, that's not $1 million, over $1 million a year. We have a unbelievable life with the house in Florida on the water that we want, the amazing house here that we've built, in the backyard for the kids, and the pool, and we have vehicles that we love, and we have plenty of savings and reserves, and we vacation. I mean, I'm taking 2 flights a month going wherever. We have an amazing, amazing life, and it doesn't take $1 million net income a year to do that. And I know people that want the Rolls Royce in Florida and the Ferraris, and they want the crazy mansions, and there's nothing wrong with that. The requirements that generally are going to come, the time requirements that are generally going to come with that, are more than I'm willing to give at this point for the additional benefit that I would receive, probably even temporarily, of having faster, more exotic cars, or bigger places to call our own around the world. So defining that life, I think, is key between you and your spouse, and or if it's just yourself. What do you want to provide for your kids? What do you want? What type of lifestyle do you want, to be able to set that baseline of maybe that isn't 500,000 a year, right? I mean, the fire community, right? Even fat fire is, I don't even know, 200 or 300,000 a year, versus the fire people that are 150,000 a year, versus the lean fire people that are under 100,000 a year. And I guess to clarify, hopefully you guys know what FIRE is. It's financially independent, retired early. And so there's lots of good content on there from those communities, and they define those different stages, or different kind of levels of fire. And for me, it was definitely fat fire. We want a life of abundance. We want to have amazing vacations, memories, experiences. We want to stay in nice places. Are we staying at the Ritz's for $1,500, $2,000 a night? No. Are we staying at nice places? Yes. But that additional amount of excess isn't worth it, versus continuing to invest and create bigger things to continue to live our great passive life. So once you've defined that, you can, target what you need to achieve that, and put the models in place through real estate. And once you've gotten, enough that you can put away, you can start to look into these exotic things. I call that, once you have more money that you can put to sleep, so to speak, right? Because when you're newer, you got to keep that money moving. I laugh because this was one of the paid cheesy real estate things I went to early on, where, yeah, they got you in a room and that was cheap to get you in that room, and then they upsold you to go to the next room somewhere else, and you go to that next room thinking, oh, that was it, a month later, and then they sold you with the next thing. But it was at that one, and it was more because me and my buddy wanted to take a trip. We went to the free one in Cleveland, and then it was like, oh, a month later is the next session of this, and let's pay this $1,200 between the two of us and go to this advanced real estate investing class in Columbus. And while we were there, they were selling. But the one thing the guy said, and he would lean back and he would move his hand around and he would say, you got to keep that money moving. And, the Burr process really is keeping that money moving. Buy, repair, rent, refinance, repeat. And I will talk in an episode about specific examples of what that looks like, and what that looked like in my journey, doing it one house at a time to doing it 5 houses at a time in portfolios. But that was the point there, is when you're newer and the income's coming in slowly, you have to keep it moving. You can't go put it in a private equity syndication or put it into ATM machines or into a promissory note, because you need to keep that money moving into an asset, controlling that asset, taking debt out, still maintaining positive cash flow, and having all that money back while controlling the asset and now move it into the next one. So Burr strategy, keep that money moving, however you want to call it. But then once you get to that point of hitting your passive life and you have plenty of income coming in, now you could look at those ways. Okay, I don't need to keep doing these houses, these apartment buildings. I can go into other things where I'm putting my money to sleep. I'm putting that 50, 100, 150, however much, $1,000 into these private investments that, yeah, it's in there for 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 years, and it's going to be kicking me out a 10% preferred return plus equity growth, or a 12% fixed return and no equity growth, or 6%, and we're going to, they're rehabbing and they're going to flip this thing and hope to get you a 30 IRR. But those are the things that you don't even think about until you have money to put to sleep. Right. So hopefully today's, made a little bit of sense. I'm trying to, as I'm getting comfortable with this, trying to keep focused yet, control all the stuff that's flowing out of my head. But we'll keep these going. Like I said, another 5 to 10 solo episodes, hitting these tips and tactics, and then we'll start bringing in guys, and we'll be having fun talking about all our adventures of ups and downs. This last week, just real quick, was a great adventure of a 24 units that we owned for about 18 months that sold for about $550,000 profit on a $100,000 investment. So great ups. And then I had a capital call from apartment buildings that I'm invested in that are struggling with interest rates. And that was an $80,000 capital call that I had to send a wire in or else get diluted materially, which means be diluted by a larger percent than the actual capital call was for. So yeah, it's adventures. Once you get into these things that are outside of your control, and we'll talk about the good and the bad of them. But yeah, again, thank you for listening to me today. Hopefully, you got some nuggets out of this, and we will continue on talking more and more. You can find out more about me or get in touch with me at realzachzimmer.com, and look forward to seeing you next time.